Have you ever stopped to reflect on the impact your words have on your life and mindset? Sometimes, what we say can shape not only our perception of the world, but also our actions and emotions. In this video, we will explore 9 phrases that a wise person, inspired by the principles of Stoicism, avoids saying. If you manage to avoid them, I assure you that you will notice a significant transformation in your life. If you're ready to learn, grow, and make the most of every experience, stay with me until the end. 1. Life isn't fair. This is a phrase we hear often, but a wise and stoic person would never utter it. Why? Because fairness, in its purest form, is a subjective concept. Life, by its very nature, does not always deal the cards evenly. Spending energy complaining about injustices doesn't change reality, it only drains us emotionally. Epictetus, a renowned Stoic philosopher, taught us that it is not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. This means that what truly affects us is not what happens, but how we interpret and react to what happens. When we say, life isn't not fair, we are adopting a victim mentality, focusing on what we believe we deserve instead of accepting reality as it is. This mindset not only causes us stress and frustration, but also prevents us from seeing the opportunities that can arise from challenging situations. Consider someone at work who constantly complains about not receiving the recognition they believe they deserve. By saying, "It's not fair," this person is handing over their happiness and satisfaction to others instead of taking control of their life and finding ways to improve their situation. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control and to accept with serenity what we cannot change. Instead of saying, "It's not fair," a wise person would opt to say, "This is how it is. What can I do about it?" This proactive mindset allows us to take control of our lives, seeking solutions instead of focusing on problems. Additionally, when we accept reality without complaining, we practice the virtue of fortitude, developing an inner resilience that allows us to face difficulties with calmness and dignity. This skill is invaluable, not only in difficult situations, but in all aspects of our lives. The next time you find yourself in a situation that seems unfair, remember the words of Epictetus and ask yourself, how can I interpret this in a way that strengthens me? You'll see that this simple question can change your perspective and help you find peace and purpose in the midst of adversity. 2. I don't have time. Another common phrase that a wise and stoic person would never say is, "I don't have time." This expression is often an excuse to avoid taking responsibility for our priorities and decisions. Seneca, another great Stoic philosopher, said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." This quote reminds us that in reality we all have the same amount of time. The difference lies in how we use it. Saying "I don't have time" is in fact admitting that we are not prioritizing certain activities or responsibilities. Imagine someone saying they don't have time to exercise, but spends hours watching TV every day. The problem isn't a lack of time, but a lack of priority and planning. Stoicism teaches us to be mindful of how we use our time and to focus on what truly matters. If something is truly important to you, you will find the time to do it. This means being honest with yourself about your priorities and making the necessary adjustments in your routine to align them with your values. A practical exercise you can do is to keep a detailed record of how you spend your time for a week. Write down all your activities and how much time you dedicate to each one. You'll be surprised to see how many hours are spent on activities that aren't really important to you. This exercise will help you identify areas where you can reduce wasted time and redirect it towards more meaningful activities. Stoicism also reminds us of the importance of living in the present. Saying, "I don't have time," often implies that we are too focused on the future or on multiple tasks at once. which prevents us from enjoying and making the most of the present moment. Practicing mindfulness in each activity we do allows us to be more productive and find satisfaction in our daily tasks. 3. It's impossible. The third phrase that a wise person would never say is, "It's impossible." This statement is a mental barrier that limits our true potential. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great emperors and Stoic philosophers, said, "If it is within your power, act. If not, bear it with dignity." This teaching reminds us that there are no impossibilities, only challenges that we have not yet learned to overcome. Saying it's impossible closes the door to creativity and innovation. Think of all the great innovations in history: flying, traveling to space, curing diseases that were once fatal. All of these feats were considered impossible until someone decided they weren't. When you claim something is impossible, you are limiting your own abilities and potentially missing out on an opportunity for growth and achievement. Stoicism encourages us to adopt a mindset of resilience and determination. Instead of seeing challenges as insurmountable obstacles, we should view them as opportunities to test our strength and creativity. Imagine facing a complicated problem at work that seems to have no solution. Instead of saying, "It's impossible," a wise person would ask, "What can I do differently? How can I approach this from another angle? Who can help me with this?" This change in perspective opens the door to new ideas and solutions. A practical example is someone who wants to learn a new language but believes it's too difficult. Instead of giving up and saying it's impossible, they could break down the goal into small, achievable steps. Learning 10 new words a day, practicing with native speakers once a week, using language learning apps. Gradually, what seemed impossible becomes manageable and ultimately achievable. The Stoics also teach us to accept what we cannot change and to work with what we can. This doesn't mean resigning to defeat, but finding ways to move forward even in adverse circumstances. Stoic resilience is a combination of accepting reality and an unwavering determination to make the best of what we have. So, the next time you think it's impossible, remember the words of Marcus Aurelius and challenge yourself to find a way to turn that impossibility into an opportunity. 4. It's not my responsibility. The fourth phrase that a wise person would never say is, "It's not my responsibility." This expression is an attempt to avoid responsibility and blame external factors for our circumstances. Epictetus reminds us, people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. Instead of looking for someone to blame, a wise person focuses on what they can control and how they can improve the situation. Saying "it's not my fault" puts us in a position of passivity and victimhood. It disconnects us from the power we have to influence our lives and turns us into spectators rather than actors. Imagine someone who always blames their work team for project failures. This approach not only generates resentment and conflict, but also hinders personal and professional growth. Stoicism teaches us the importance of personal responsibility. By accepting responsibility for our actions and decisions, we empower ourselves to make positive changes. This doesn't mean unjustly blaming ourselves, but recognizing our own contributions to the situations we find ourselves in and working to improve them. A practical example would be someone who is always late to meetings and blames traffic or other external factors. Instead of saying, "It's not my fault," a wise person could analyze their daily routine and look for ways to be more punctual, such as leaving home earlier or finding alternative routes. This approach not only improves their punctuality, but also shows respect for others' time. Additionally, taking responsibility for our actions allows us to learn from our mistakes. Every time we say, "It's not my fault," we lose a valuable opportunity to reflect and grow. By accepting our mistakes, we can identify what went wrong, what we could have done differently, and how we can avoid the same mistakes in the future. 5. I'll never change. The fifth phrase that a wise person never says is, "I'll never change." This expression reflects a fixed mindset that goes against the principles of Stoicism, which teaches us that we are always in a process of growth and improvement. Seneca said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." This means that there is always room for change and improvement in our lives. Saying, "I'll never change," is a form of resignation that prevents us from reaching our true potential. It's like putting an invisible barrier to our own growth. Imagine someone who says they will never be able to learn a new skill because they are too old or not smart enough. This mindset limits our possibilities and keeps us trapped in a cycle of stagnation. Stoicism teaches us that change is inevitable and that we must adapt to it with grace and wisdom. By adopting a growth mindset, we recognize that we can always improve and learn, regardless of our circumstances. This allows us to face challenges with a positive and proactive attitude. A practical example could be someone who wants to improve their health habits, but believes they will never be able to quit smoking or start exercising regularly. Instead of saying, "I'll never change," a wise person would focus on small steps and celebrate each progress, no matter how small. They could seek support, set achievable goals, and remind themselves that change is a gradual process. Stoicism also teaches us to accept our imperfections and to constantly work on improving. This doesn't mean we have to be perfect, but that we should strive to be better each day. By accepting that change is a natural part of life, we can free ourselves from self-criticism and focus on our personal development. 6. I'm always right. The sixth phrase that a wise person never says is, "I'm always right." This statement is not only arrogant, but also closes the door to new ideas and perspectives. Marcus Aurelius said, "Accept everything that happens to you, even if it seems unpleasant, because it could be more appropriate for your progress and inner success." This means that humility and openness to learning from others are essential for our growth. Saying, "I'm always right," puts us in a defensive position and prevents us from learning from our experiences and from others. Imagine someone in a discussion who refuses to listen to other opinions because they are convinced they have the whole truth. This attitude not only generates conflict, but also limits our understanding and prevents us from seeing the bigger picture. Stoicism teaches us to be humble and recognize that we don't know everything. By admitting that we might be wrong, we open the door to new opportunities for learning and growth. This not only makes us wiser, but also helps us build better relationships with others based on respect and empathy. A practical example would be in the workplace. Imagine a colleague offering you a suggestion on how to improve a project you're working on. Instead of rejecting the suggestion because you believe your approach is the only correct one, a wise person would listen carefully and consider how that new perspective could enhance the final outcome. This approach not only improves the project, but also strengthens collaboration and mutual respect within the team. 7. I don't care at all. The seventh phrase that a wise person never says is, "I don't care at all." This expression reflects an attitude of indifference that goes against the principles of Stoicism, which teaches us to live with purpose and compassion. Seneca said, "Do not be offended by the role nature has given you. Play that role with devotion and humility." This means that we must take responsibility for our actions and their effects on the world. Saying "I don't care" can be a way to avoid pain or responsibility, but it also disconnects us from others and from our own sense of purpose. Imagine someone saying "I don't care" when a friend asks for help. This attitude not only harms the relationship, but also deprives the person of the opportunity to grow through the act of helping others. Stoicism teaches us that we are all interconnected and that our actions have an impact on the world. By caring for others and our responsibilities, we strengthen our connection to humanity and find a greater sense of purpose in our lives. A practical example could be in the workplace. Imagine a co-worker struggling with a task and asking you for help. Saying, "I don't care," would not only be insensitive, but would also cause you to miss the opportunity to strengthen the relationship and contribute to a more collaborative and positive work environment. Instead, a wise person would take the time to help, demonstrating empathy and strengthening the team. 8. I'll never be truly happy. The 8th phrase that a wise person never says is, "I'll never be truly happy." This expression reflects a mindset of hopelessness that contradicts the teachings of Stoicism, which remind us that happiness depends on our perceptions and attitudes, not on external circumstances. Epictetus said, "Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control, and others are not." This quote teaches us that our happiness is in our hands, not in the outside world. Saying, "I'll never be truly happy," puts us in a position of helplessness and resignation. Imagine someone who has gone through a painful breakup and believes they will never find love or happiness again. This mindset can lead to a cycle of negativity and self-pity, preventing them from seeing opportunities for growth and new experiences. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control, our own emotions, thoughts, and actions. By changing our perception and attitude toward life, we can find happiness even in the midst of adversity. The key lies in acceptance and gratitude for what we have, rather than focusing on what we lack. A practical exercise could be to keep a gratitude journal. Each day, write down 3 things you are grateful for. This can help shift your focus from the negative to the positive and recognize the small joys in life that we often overlook. 9. I don't need anyone. The 9th phrase that a wise person never says is, "I don't need anyone." This expression reflects an attitude of extreme self-sufficiency that can lead to loneliness and isolation. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, said, "Man is by nature a social being, and whoever isolates himself from his fellow man, who cuts himself off from the community, must be a stranger to society." This quote reminds us that human connection is fundamental to our existence and well-being. Saying, "I don't need anyone," is a way of closing doors and avoiding vulnerability. Imagine someone who has been hurt in the past and decides never to trust anyone again. This mindset may seem protective, but it actually deprives us of the support, love, and growth opportunities that come from meaningful relationships. Stoicism teaches us that while we should be self-sufficient and capable of facing our own challenges, we also need community and the support of others. Healthy and meaningful relationships provide us with perspective, comfort, and the opportunity to learn and grow through interaction with others. A practical example could be someone facing a difficult problem at work or in their personal life. Instead of trying to solve everything on their own and saying, "I don't need anyone," a wise person would seek the advice and support of trusted friends, family, or colleagues. By sharing our struggles and listening to the experiences and advice of others, we find more creative and effective solutions.